Oh, God. Oh, the lighting is so good for me. Oh. The rosy face is undercutting the look I'm trying to get with the eyeliner. Hello, everyone. I'm Neil, aka Ishmelon, and welcome back to my Let's Talk Over Pie series, where I talk about the Magic the Gathering color pie philosophy in color pie order. So I've already done white, I've already done blue, I'll set links to those previous videos in the description, and today, if you couldn't tell, we're talking about black. I'm excited for this one because black is probably the most misunderstood colors, and I'm gonna give some of the credit for that villainous propaganda to white, just because you know that's kind of what it does. I've got a chip on my shoulder if you couldn't tell. Anyway, to reiterate again, the idea of this series is to sort of elaborate and expand upon and make more accessible the color pie philosophy that the Magic the Gathering card game uses and exhibits in the cards and characters it creates. Because I feel it is a very interesting, fun, creative tool to use. And in fact, to sort of expand upon what I've said in the past, the more and more that I think about these colors, that I write for these videos, that I deliberate upon all of these ideas and everything, the more and more that I realize that the color pie philosophy is really, more than anything else, just such an excellent tool for creating characters, be that for writing, giving motivations and thoughts and reactions, be that in art to give a sort of aesthetic or mood, or telling that story visually, be it TTRPGs if you're trying to help decide your character's actions, what their motivations are, or even the DM trying to describe what certain factions' goals are, all that kind of stuff. It's much more for creating those characters and sort of access to design, more than it is a personality defining tool. This shit ain't MBTI, alright? More than anything else, the color pie is an indicator. Your color identity does not define you. Your actions and choices and ideals define your color identity, is what I'm saying, I guess. So, I guess we just begin talking about black. Let's start off by reiterating the key phrase for this color, that being power through ruthlessness, defining black's goal through its methods. As I did mention in the sort of summarized overview video, which I'll post a link to, I tend to see power through ruthlessness as more of a tool for fiction and fantasy to use. For more contemporary key phrase, something in more modern and colloquially relatable, I like to use satisfaction through opportunity. For this whole thing, the two are sort of interchangeable, but I just like to have that distinction that the official one is power through ruthlessness, my personal one is satisfaction through opportunity. So now let's try and define what that means. Black's idea and definition of power or satisfaction sort of stems from, at the basis point, wanting to be in control of its own decisions. Black is the color that most values its own agency and individuality, and at the same time, it is also often the most covetous color alignment. It doesn't really matter what objective thing it really wants, be it either financial standing or political influence or just a legacy. Black just needs to ensure it has access to that thing, and to feel confident that its grip on that desire can never be loosened by outside forces. That is the idea of black's power, of black's satisfaction. Having everything it wants, and being able to take what it needs, free of debt and servitude. I like to follow this value up with a definition of how far black would be willing to go, of how far the color itself would be willing to go, which, for black, is really easy. In order to reach its idea of full control over itself, its resources, its surroundings, black is willing to give up just about anything, so long as black is still able to enjoy and benefit what it gets in return. To a black-aligned individual, the world is transactional. Nothing comes without a price. To this end, they see absolutely everything as assets to be seized, currency to be spent, favors, relationships, identities, everything. They'd trade it all away for access to that one thing that they truly want. Now for some examples of Black's power or satisfaction. A lot of times, Black's power will be defined by being the top authority of whatever situation it finds itself in. Black wants to have the final say. This could be the owner of a restaurant, it could be the head of a governmental organization, even sort of abstractly, the curator of an art gallery. Whereas in this particular example, they don't specifically care about the art or the expression, they just want to be in charge, have that power, because that's where they find themselves in, and the kind of power fantasy they're trying to live through. That's why I said kind of abstract. Black-aligned individuals want to be in control of everything around them, so they know what they say goes. So they feel they are totally free from the burden of servitude. Their power could be due to being owed some kind of debts themselves, be it loans or favors, etc. The more someone owes to you, the more you can use them and what they need to your advantage. One important thing to note about Black is that no amount of power is ever enough, truly. There is always another step up, another conquest ahead, another rank to achieve. The irony of Black is that, more often than not, their desperate pursuit of satisfaction will never leave them satisfied. And now, some methods of their ruthlessness, their opportunity that they use. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you need a ladder, anything can be a rung. Black, as described, can and will use absolutely anything at its disposal to push forward. These could be as simple as mooching off family to avoid paying for rent or food. It could be abusing the generosity of friends to get rides to places, or finding any legal loophole you can squeeze through to get out of a ticket. Oftentimes, even the truth is malleable to a Black-aligned individual. If no one else was there to witness it, why wouldn't you just embellish a story a little bit to make yourself seem cooler? One of your superiors at work got caught doing something improper, and you have evidence? Well, that looks like blackmail to me. Or even taking their place after you get them fired. Black isn't necessarily immoral. I feel that necessary to state right now. It's amoral. There's a difference, which I'll get to later, but there is a clear difference. Unless it's in writing, you don't owe anyone a gosh darn thing. Culture? Appropriate for profit. Art? Monetize that shit and mass produce it. Someone starts crying about ethics? I'm sorry, I didn't realize courtesy was in the Constitution. In addition, since Black's pursuit of power is never ending, they often realize the best way to stay ahead of the competition is to kick them while they're down, cripple them while they're behind. The easiest way to win a race is to run unopposed. And now that we've gone over what Black wants and how it plans to get there, let's look at the sort of different aspects of Black as a whole, starting with its sort of transactional or zero-sum mindset. Black sees the world as a zero-sum game, meaning if there are winners, there will be losers by sheer necessity of the system and what it requires. It's not their fault. It's just how it is. In order to receive something, another thing must be taken away. The most they can do is try to take more than they give, as far as value or potential is concerned. You did someone a favor? Well, clearly they owe you something in return. Since it sees society in such an objectively transactional way, it assumes that everyone else does too. Or at least, it believes that it must assume so, because to act otherwise would be to give themselves a disadvantage against those who actually do. If they act in any situation as if somebody else is working on altruism, then when that person suddenly isn't, Black has left themselves vulnerable. Black is easily the most competitive color. Oftentimes it might not have interest in doing anything unless that thing can be gamified and turned into something that can be won or performed the best. Black's gotta be number one. Which sort of segues into my next point, is that Black is always looking out for number one. Black wants to be able to exercise its own personal agency, to live its life with security and the confidence that it has the freedom to act as it sees fit, undisturbed. To that end, it will prioritize its own well-being over that of those around it, oftentimes resulting in an inflated ego and a tendency to take things very personally. Black would rather live in solitude than keep people around who risk itself becoming vulnerable. A lot of Black-aligned characters to this end are lone wolves. Even characters who are just partially Black-aligned can easily be turned into those sort of guarded, like stonewall emotional types. Black believes any and every weakness can and will be exploited by the competition, and it cannot, will not, risk losing what it has gained. Next point about Black is, as I mentioned earlier, its amorality. It's living and existing in this world of gray. Black sees ethics and morals as arbitrary limitations set by those either too afraid to make the hard decisions or created by others who are playing the same game they are. Everything is manipulable. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Most of the time, a Black-aligned individual will come off as the pessimist or the cynic to the people around them. Black just thinks that they're the only ones seeing the world for how it is. It sees itself as a realist, a pragmatist. It believes the binary outlook of good and evil is either propaganda or a childish idealism. It's not as simple as throwing the cursed ring into the lava pit, and it believes you're weak and immature for thinking that it would be that simple. For Black, life is a winnable game, and they want to be the one holding the rulebook. So now that we know Black internally, I'm going to move on to my favorite portion of these, the color of topics, interactions, and similarities, differences, opinions of the other colors. And I'm going to start these in order with their allies and then their enemies. Now again, there are going to be some sort of repeats here. I've already done a video on white, I've already done a video on blue, and I've done this section for both of those, so I'm going to be going over Black's opinion on blue, Black's opinion on white. There might be some overlap there, but I do my best in these sections to try and use the color of topics perspective. So I'm going to try and see these colors from Black's perspective. With that said, let's start with Black talking about blue. So in regards to Black and Blue's relationship, let's start with where they agree. Black and Blue both agree on practicality and resource management. They both want to make sure that they have as much available to them as possible so that they can improve, achieve, progress, get better, get stronger. They want to make sure that they have everything that they can and have all that secured. Black and Blue both agree on the willingness to make the hard calls and sort of be the villain. Blue oftentimes, because it's done the calculations, it knows where the result is going to go. It knows that if a certain thing isn't done or is done, that a certain consequence will be enacted that nobody can afford. So it will do the thing to make sure that doesn't happen. Black, because while it sees everybody else waffling over what is the most okay decision, what is the most optimal way to go about this, Black doesn't care because it sees the ends and it sees the means and it knows that the result is what's important, and how they get there, that's just what was needed to get there. Final point that Black and Blue both agree on is that the idea of improving yourself in any aspect grants an advantage. Blue likes to amass knowledge and improvement and skills and all that, and does its best to see anything gained not as extra weight or unnecessary fluff, but as something that either can be used later or can be used now if they're creative enough. Black sees all of it as value, as currency, and both kind of in the similar idea, but with Black it's more about the tiniest advantages. These little, like, victory by 1,000 cuts, you know what I mean? The more that Black can amass, the more that it has. Like I said, Black's kind of covetous. Moving on to where Black disagrees with its ally Blue. Black believes in victory above everything else, whereas Blue is accepting of learning through failure. Black wants to win. It doesn't care what it needs to do to get there. Black wants to win. It sees loss as just that. Loss. Failure. Objective insuperiority. Whereas blue looks for lessons in everything. Blue sees a failure and immediately goes, okay, why did I fail? What could I have done better? How can I use this as a lesson in the future? Next up is black's self-reliance versus blue's willingness to cooperate. Black will hoard information, facts, to itself, and doesn't want to share anything, or at least is super hesitant to share anything without anything else coming its way, because it feels giving up any of that is revealing vulnerability, giving up its own strength, its own advantages. Whereas blue knows that two heads are better than one, man. Like, you're gonna think of things that I'm not gonna think of. Let's share these ideas, that way we can both get even further. Blue just wants to progress and learn and know. Black wants to be on top of the pile, even if that molehill is like a foot tall at most. Whereas blue is like, if we combine our fucking molehills. I don't know where I'm going with this analogy. You know what I mean. Cut that. And the final difference I have noted between blue and black is blue wanting to untie the knot, so to speak, whereas black would just cut the wire. For this example, I use the anecdote of the Gordian knot, where there was this, I'm pretty sure it's a historical thing with Alexander the Great. I'm not super educated in this matter specifically, but I know of the idea. There was this rope tied in a knot that nobody could get undone, and it was this huge big thing, like, oh, I bet I could do it, like pulling the fucking sword from the stone, man. People are trying to figure out how to undo this knot. Meanwhile, Alexander the Great comes in, fucking Macedonian conqueror, and is like, I know how to untie it. Sword, chop. Cuts the whole knot in half. That exactly is black versus blue in this situation. Black is like, okay, you want that untied? Boom, it's untied. You didn't say it needed to be in one piece still. I win. Black focused on the victory through any means, whereas blue was trying to figure out the puzzle. And to finish this point off, let's go through how black views blue. More than any of the other colors, black sees blue as its biggest competition, its greatest intellectual rival. If there were anyone who could truly get a leg up over them, it would be blue. In that way, it holds blue to a higher respect than the rest of the other colors. That's not to say it wouldn't rob blue of its successful results or cheat from blue's answer sheet, so to speak. Black thinks of blue as a wonderful resource of new ideas and products that it can exploit. In fact, if black is able to slap its name on whatever blue works to produce, it will. And it'll make blue thankful for the opportunity to be used. But black can never drop its guard around blue without risking blue learning what's going on and figuring out a way to beat them. Because if anyone could, it'd be blue. Now that we've finished with blue, let's move on to black's other ally, red. Where red and black agree, the first point is on individuality and freedom of choice. As I mentioned earlier, black is obsessed with its own agency, with its own freedom, and red lives by that. It doesn't try and achieve that because it thinks, why would it try and buy that? It already has it. Either way, they both so highly value who they are as a person and their identity and their ability to express themselves and live in their own fashion. Second point, kind of a fun point, red and black both really value spectacle and showmanship. Black to sort of serve its own ego, red because it's just fun, man. Like, I'm gonna go straight to the actual cards for a second here. The Rakdos Guild on Ravnica, specifically in the Guilds of Ravnica block. That is exceedingly, this point I'm trying to make here, to the point that their mechanic was called Spectacle. Like, red and black are the super villain. They are like expressive, extreme, and just hyper, look at me. Like, they love having a good time. Sometimes to different ends, but the idea is the same. The idea is there. Also sort of relating to that, the third point, black and red are both in agreement upon, I guess agree isn't the right word, but are similar in the point that they are sort of the most consumed by gluttony and compulsion more easily than not. Black is a color that takes things very personally. So it can often be consumed by greed or revenge or envy, whereas red sees the shiny, wants the shiny. Black often because it can use that shiny for other things. Red because, hey, it's shiny. I'm doing such a disservice to red. In all seriousness, because they are so focused on who they are and what they want, oftentimes what they want can be put in front of what they need. Oftentimes, characters with certain compulsions or disorders are going to be those individuals who are letting themselves be consumed by that sort of black identity and ideology where they just want and want and want. Now let's go into where red and black differ. The first point being, black sees the idea of chaos more as a tool, whereas red sees chaos as the point. Black will use chaos and invoke chaos because it knows that it can plan around that. If it starts it, it can control it, and it can isolate it and use that to its advantage. Whereas red, like I said, they see chaos as the point. Like, that's where they thrive, that's where they live, and that's where life truly happens, is in the chaos. Black will always use that kind of thing to its advantage and do its best to make the best of the situation for its own standing, whereas red just wants to live in it and revel in it. Next point is probably one of the most major differences between black and red, which is black's pride versus red's love. And I sort of see this as where they stand on compassion and relationships. Black's ego can a lot of times get in the way of its personal relationships. Black will value itself and its own well-being over that of a relationship and what a relationship needs. It's not as willing to sacrifice its own comfort, shall we say, for love. Whereas red will forsake everything for love. If it cares about you, it will drop everything and devote itself to you. Black isn't so willing to step up and do that unless it can see something coming its way out of that. And to sort of sidestep, tangent off of that, black values results, whereas red values experiences. I mentioned earlier that black values the end game, whereas red loves the journey. Red takes the path with glee because it hates endings. Because when things are over, then they're done. And they're not doing anything anymore until they find the next thing to go towards. Whereas black just sees the value in that finality. It sees the value in the result, objective figures to its own benefit. Now let's see how black views red. Black will usually see red as an adorable little ball of chaos. It's just so entertaining to set loose and watch as it goes. At least until red starts messing with black's stuff. As soon as black gets affected, then it's game over, no more playtime. Black sees red as the color it can most easily manipulate for its own ends. Although generally that means red causing a distraction or acting the fool. With that in mind, if there were ever a time where black could feel responsible, it would be for red. To black, red is kind of just clueless, helpless, like a lost puppy. Black sees red as incapable of taking care of itself, which it could view as either useless or sad, depending on the context and the particular black-aligned individual. Well, we've covered both of the allies of black. Now let's talk about black's enemies and the relationships thereof, starting infamously with black's probably most recognized enemy, white. Now the first difference between black and white is black's view of amorality and white's position on morality. Now the thing is, I went over this in my video on white, but white will always see black as immoral because it has no morality, and it doesn't act in morality. Whereas black, and I went over this earlier too, in this video, black's amorality leads it to seeing white's morality as subjective and biased and kind of just fascistic. Black sees the world and recognizes that everything's complicated. There are figures and instances and subjective realities and perspectives that can never fully match up into any one moral ideology. Meanwhile, white still will insist that there is a right way and there is a wrong way, and black sees that as just frustrating and honestly damaging. The next difference is black's service to self versus white's service to others, which I think is pretty self-defined. Black will always secure its own benefit, will always secure its own safety, whereas white will give up anything for anyone that needs it. White thinks that everybody should be on the same level. It will take from those who have too much and give to those who have too little. Whereas black, if you have too little, that's your fault, man. That's on you for not taking the steps to take what you want, what you need. Third point of difference is black's pragmatism versus white's idealism. Black lives more in a world of facts and figures than white does. White sees the moral value in things, which this point kind of leans a bit into that first point still, but white sees the world how it should be, and when it sees something or someone acting in difference to that, sees that as wrong and bad and evil. Whereas black takes the world as it is, not as it wants it to be. Because black's gonna make it how it wants to be, and is dead set on that. Although the colors are so distinctly different, there are some things that they agree on. And the first point I have written down here being the ends justifying the means. I mentioned earlier how black is willing to press the button when it needs to be pressed. White in a similar vein. Both colors have specific goals they have in mind. Objective goals they have in mind. Quantitative achievements to make and changes to reach. I'm getting all my words mixed up, I'm sorry, but the idea is black and white are the ones most focused on accomplishing goals. Black and white are the two colors that are most affected by their own agenda and consumed by their own agenda. They want things a certain way, and they're going to work towards that. The thing in the middle is just the work to get there. It's gonna get to the ends, whatever the means be. Black and white are also the ones that envelop themselves the most in tribalism. And this is sort of combining black's all for one and white's one for all. See what I mean? As far as its own group is concerned. Black and white together can agree on the benefits of a group so long as it's their group. Black and white together will utilize us versus them more than any other color combo. And the final similarity between the two is a sort of authoritarian control dictating the rules. You see where I'm going here? Black and white, idealistically, pretty fucking fascist and authoritarian. Like, black and white together believe in authoritarian control. They believe in dictating the rules. This is how things are gonna go. If you don't like it, too bad for you. This is the right way to do things, and this is how we are going to benefit the most from doing these things. Black and white will, most commonly than other colors, enact a hierarchical state and class structure, and these are the people at the top, these are the people at the bottom serve the people at the top, and that's how it is. That is how our system works. Moving on to how black views white. Black sees white as a self-righteous dictator, incapable of understanding anything beyond its extremely limited worldview. In circumstances where black is required to work with white, it will end up becoming absolutely infuriated. The things black would consider resources, white would deem indispensable and sacred. Even if black wanted to find a middle ground, it knows that there is no middle ground for white. There can be no compromise. It's their way or the highway. Therefore, black will often go out of its way to avoid even having to deal with white in the first place. However, black does acknowledge that white's incorruptibility and rigidity leads to it being extremely predictable, and that itself has value. Black knows exactly how to get under white's skin and force it to do what black wants, sometimes without white even noticing. Black sees white as a nuisance, surely, but also knows how to deal with them when it has to. Now for the second enemy and final color relationship we're going to go over for black's relationship with green. This is another one of the color combinations that I really find very interesting, and also kind of overlooked because of how simple some people can see it on the surface, mechanically in the games, yada yada. Let me get into it. Where black and green primarily differ is the ideals of black's industry, black's exploitation, versus green's preservation. These two things are in direct odds with each other. Black wants to take resources and use resources to benefit itself. Doesn't matter how it leaves the rest of the world when it does that. Meanwhile, green wants to keep things how they are. It doesn't need all of this build. And you see, that's fucking poison you're putting in the sky, black. Green sees the long term, and black is only focused on its short-term benefits and expansion. Black also focuses more on solitude, whereas green thrives in community. Black wants to be on its own because it doesn't want to have to rely on other people. Meanwhile, green knows that's how people are. We're social animals. Like, we need these small, tight-knit communities in order to survive and to raise our children properly. It takes a village. Meanwhile, black is like, no, I can handle this on my own. I don't need any more mouths to feed. I don't need any other people to be responsible for. I don't need other people to make myself weak. I'll just get reliant on them. I need to be self-reliant. Another difference is, and this is kind of similar, I guess, to the first point, but black's implacability, black's hunger versus green's contentment. I like to see this more as pride versus humility. Black sees itself as so grandiose and so, here I am. It sees itself as such a force, because that's what it wants to be. It wants to be powerful, notable. It wants to be superior. Meanwhile, green doesn't need that. Green is happy as it is. It's happy with who it is, with what it has, and green's chill. And black has no chill. That's the only way I can put it. Like, that sums it up. Like, that is literally, that is... Black is so proud and ego-focused, and green is humble and happy. Simple. Final point I want to make about the difference between black and green is determination versus destiny. When I say determination, I mean self-determination. I mean, black wants to hold the reins of its own life path and define its own fate, define its own destiny, or even just buck them both and say that is not real. Our actions lead to our consequences, and we are not defined by who we are supposed to be. Meanwhile, green believes that there is a proper path for everything. There is a reason for your choices, and you will lead into this direction. And oftentimes, green will believe that one's own actions to avoid its destiny will lead it straight into that predetermined fate anyway. It's the whole free will debate. Is black and green? They are the two sides of the debate. However, as ideologically opposed as they are, they do still have some similarities and some things they agree on. For example, green and black will both agree on methods of survivorship and the truth of morbidity. They both believe you gotta do what you gotta do, whatever it takes to survive, to keep going. Black and green are both very brutal colors, in truth. Like, life and death might seem like opposites in certain ideologies, but for black and green both, life and death is the same thing. Black will pull life from death, meanwhile green knows that life and death feed each other. The world is a circle. Life is a cycle. They both know that. It's morbid, and it's dark, and it's gruesome, but it's true in both of their eyes. Black and green also both believe in profanity, in irreverence. And what I mean by that is that they're sort of sacrilegious. How do I describe this? Black and green are both very sort of paganist and occult. To put it in a less religiously charged way, they both have an understanding of what's important, what matters, and what can be practically utilized. Black and green are the witch in the woods. That's the best way to put it. They will utilize the natural functions of the entire world. Like, to take from that last point, they will take the cycle of life and use each piece of it. Nothing is sacred to black and green both. And the final point that black and green both agree on is predation, territory, domination. Black and green are both the colors that will hold something to be theirs. This is my thing. This is my land. This is my resource. This is my people. Black and green both believe that might makes right. The strong rule over the weak. Black because that is the right of the strong, and green because that is the natural order of things. The stronger you are, the more you have. The stronger you are, the more you need. And finally, let's see how black sees green through its own eyes. Black, in general, sees green as the old fogey, stuck in their ways, unable or unwilling to adapt or simply take what they want. Black acknowledges that green is powerful. It understands that green could move the very earth if it really wanted to. But black is confounded at the fact that green either doesn't seem to recognize that as well, or simply has no desire to flex its own strength. Black could think of a million ways to benefit itself with green's strength, but every attempt to try and match it leaves it either damaged or penniless. Black is insulted at green's insistence upon patience and fate. If black truly wants something, it simply takes it. As such, doesn't that mean it deserves what it's earned instead of waiting for it to be handed to them? But aside from all the frustration and baffling complacency, black still can't get over the fact that green never sees them as an enemy like white does. And that's the scariest part. Now that we've finished black's relationships and perspectives on the other colors, let's go over black's personality traits, we'll say. The quirks of being black aligned, starting with its strengths and weaknesses. Now, the things that black are good at involve self-sufficiently. Black is a highly capable, independent worker. It can achieve so much on its own because it simply believes it can and has a necessary desire to be self-sufficient and therefore acts in such a way. Black has a sort of cleverness in problem solving. It's very apt towards thinking outside the box. The Gordian knot example I went over earlier. It'll use resources that most others wouldn't think of because it has those resources. Black is very skilled at separating sentiment from business. It can cut feelings from proper profession. It is able to look at things objectively because it has a very objective worldview. Little shimdog in the corner there. As I mentioned earlier, black sees things as facts and figures, as objective goals, resources, and methods and means and ends. Sort of towards that point, black is easily able to leave behind things or people that are holding them back. Because holding on to stale sentiment and plateaued relationships and compassion isn't going to progress them any further, isn't going to give them anything more than they already have. They're going to drop things that are slowing them down and move on to the next rank, to the next achievement, to the next rung in that ladder. Black is very good at utilizing every resource available to them, specifically things like networking, or delegating, or budgeting. Like, black is the color that is most easily able to trim the fat of whatever sort of situation, project, organization, whatever that may be. They will cut out what's unnecessary and increase profits, because that is their goal, which... Black's a capitalist. I'm just going to say right there. That's all they are. That's the truth of it. However, despite all of those things that it's good at, it still has some weaknesses, some flaws. Black is the color that can most easily be triggered by jabs at their pride, their ego, or succumbing to their own self-obsession. They can get distracted by personal attacks, and they will prioritize things that make them seem grander, bigger, stronger, more significant. Black is, while this can be seen as a strength, it can also be seen as a weakness. Black will sacrifice personal relationships for selfish gain. Since it values independence, it doesn't value relationships all that much. It'll see them as the resources they offer, and it can see them as resources to be proffered. Like, black will drop relationships, even ones that it enjoys, for the next rung up the ladder, for whatever it can gain through whatever situation. And sort of also in that idea, it will feed its short-term satisfaction by unsustainable means. It will burn its resources to make it feel better in the moment, not realizing or not understanding or willingly ignoring that it will need those things later. Another point, Black's social alienation and tendency toward near antisocial behaviors and habits are a huge detriment to its own goals and achievements, even though it still values, or it still holds pride in being self-sufficient. It can often go to the point of social alienation and complete separation from other people. Another weakness is Black's tendency toward antagonism. Sort of the need to win in any situation or encounter can lead to being the opponent in situations that don't require or warrant or even benefit from having opposing sides. Black will have this so much obsession with being the one, with being the person to achieve, with being that figure, that it will turn cooperative situations into competition and be the only one that does that. Now let's take a look at a Black aligned personality at its best. This is sort of someone living in their Black aligned personality, or a character thriving in living in these sort of Black aligned ideals, decisions, paths, I guess. Black at its best will be continuously looking ahead and taking action to improve its situation. Black is always thinking about the next conquest, the next success. It doesn't let itself get stuck in the past, and it will always be trying to set itself up for the next victory. If it doesn't see a path forward, it'll correct itself. If something gets in Black's way, it'll figure out how to eliminate the obstacle. Whatever it takes, Black will forge its own success. Black at its best will also keep those around them competitive and innovative. Its inherent antagonism can be used as a strength, will often create a sense of competition with those around them, oftentimes leading to both parties improving themselves in the process out of sheer necessity. But don't be mistaken, Black will still aim to win at all costs, but it still wants to win where victory can be claimed, to the point where it will even create situations where victory can be claimed. And I know that the only thing better than winning is winning against a stronger opponent. Black at its best will be keenly focused on its goals. Black at its best will be trying to ensure that it doesn't get derailed by distractions, whether they be emotions, relationships, vices, etc. Black will always try to keep its mind focused on what it needs to achieve and what needs to be done in order to achieve it. Black is an expert at separating business and sentiment, at least when it's able to get itself to focus and readjust, which leads me into Black at its worst can lend itself to being ruthless and vindictive, and will have an obsession with personal slights if it lets itself succumb to them. When a Black-aligned individual feels they've been wronged by someone, it is very easy for them to seek revenge or extreme payback. Black wants to have the last word. It wants to not owe anyone anything, including revenge. When something becomes personal for Black, it becomes their new goal to take care of, even to the point of obsession and misguided productivity. Black at its worst will also envelop itself in egotistical arrogance and delusions of grandeur. Black is the color that most easily falls to the failing of an inflated sense of pride. It can, and often does, think it's the hottest thing around, but unless it takes steps outside of its echo chamber or personal bubble, it'll start to think it's incapable of being wrong, of being the loser. Black may end up twisting its own truth, so it feels justified in blaming others for its own failings because, clearly this couldn't be my fault, I'm great! When this flaw has grown far enough, Black will fight tooth and nail to preserve its own grandiose self-image. And the final major flaw for Black is its own cruelty and antisocial estrangement. Since Black is the color most in tune with its own desires and prioritizes its own needs over all else, it can often become blinded to the wants, desires, and feelings of those around them. When a Black-aligned individual becomes so focused on their own life to the point of dispassionate, reactionary anger, or pushing away friends and loved ones, it's a clear sign they're in a bad place. it can be easy for that competitive, pragmatic, and suspicious mindset to turn into viciousness and lashing out due to fear and paranoia. Sometimes it's even harder for them to realize they need help, and they'll just spiral until they become unreachable. Okay, I get that so far this video has gotten a little heavy at some points, and for Black that's kind of warranted. Like I said, they're the most misunderstood of all 5 colors. But I want to sort of bring it back around, maybe a bit of lightheartedness, maybe not, but something a bit more relatable. So we're going to now move over to examples of Black-aligned characters in fiction, pop culture. And for these, I want to try and focus on mono-black characters, like the ones that are primarily Black-aligned without too much other color interference. And I'm going to start this off by saying a vast number of Black-aligned characters in fiction are the villain. Especially in like Disney films, I'm talking Scar, I'm talking Jafar, I'm talking Ursula, Gaston, the hunter from Tarzan, like all of these people, super Black-aligned folks, in the negative ways, in the evil ways. But there do also exist Black-aligned heroes, but I'm gonna get to those later, because they're the fun ones. We'll start off with the villains. One of the most prominent, legendary, iconic Black-aligned characters, just even among heroes and villains together, characters. Emperor Palpatine. Do you know his first name is Sheev? Sheev Palpatine. This guy is mono black to the bone. He using every resource he can to garner power in the Senate. He is manipulating both sides of this war to claim power. He manipulates the separatists into building this opposition force that he can defeat on the side of the Senate and take power and basically create a martial coup from inside. On top of that, he is going from apprentice to apprentice, just trying to get the stronger person to be his pawn and tool, until he eventually gets to Darth Vader, who he is able to just manipulate to the core. And I don't know if this part is canon, but I'm pretty sure he's the one that killed Padme. I don't know if that's canon, but I'm pretty sure it's like, yeah. But yeah, his entire goal was literally dominating the galaxy, and he becomes the Emperor. It all works out for him, until, you know, it suddenly doesn't. Next Black-aligned character is another villain, or at least antagonist, Andrew Ryan from BioShock. Now this guy, he's kind of the epitome of capitalist ideals, to the point of he creates this city, isolated city, that is a self-proclaimed meritocracy, where people are not ruled by gods, they are not ruled by kings, they are ruled by men. But what he means by that is that he's using that sort of sacrilegious rhetoric as a justification for believing himself to be this self-made man, when really he's just some wealthy dude, industrialist, who created this company town underwater so that he could benefit from it, and he misguidedly believes that that will create a superior society, when in the end, I mean, those of you who have played BioShock, you see what happens. Rapture is a shithole. Like, every major department head, every major company in that little world is so corrupt and abusive and exploitative of the workers there that they were able to trick into going there to labor. Andrew Ryan epitomizes the black ideology, is what I'm trying to get at. But in the end, that sort of misguided meritocracy is just an excuse for the wealthy to exploit the lower class. Even to the point of, like, one of his competitors disguises himself. Spoilers for BioShock 1. Sorry. One of his competitors disguises himself as a hero of the people, a hero of the working class, to exploit the working class to take over everything. Like, that's the whole point. Both Andrew Ryan and, I forget the name of the other guy, but Andrew Ryan and the other guy are two mono-black aligned competitors, and they both are using the working class as a resource to get what they want. I'm sorry I'm so heated about this, but... So that's Andrew Ryan. But enough about villains. We know mono black villains by heart because we're shown them all the time. I want to spend a little bit more time... Fuck you, man! Am I punk yet? Let's talk about some black aligned heroes. We have a couple of them in the actual Magic the Gathering lore. There is Liliana. There is... God, I think his name's Toshiro Umezawa. One of the characters from... I think the hero and protagonist of the original Kamigawa block storyline. But outside of that, the first black aligned hero I have on this list is Princess Tiana from The Princess and the Frog. And she is a black aligned hero because the whole inciting incident for the majority of the story is that she agrees to a deal with Prince Nazim, who has been turned into a frog. And the whole premise of this, she doesn't do it because it's the right thing to do. She doesn't do it because he's been unnaturally transformed. She's not green aligned. She doesn't do it because she's going to learn something from it. She doesn't do it because she's emotionally attached to him. She does it because he offers her compensation. She has this ambition to open this restaurant in memory of her father. She is working herself to the bone. She is sacrificing her own time, her own, dare I say it, sanity. As somebody who works in the service industry, I understand what she's doing. Like, the build up to her character and showing off her character, she is a diligent worker. She is independent and she is capable. And she's just trying to amass these resources to buy this location to get to the point where she has this famous club. That's what she wants. She has this goal in mind, and she's taking every step she can to achieve that goal. Even getting to the point of her... God, I forget her friend's name, but getting to the point of being at her friend's place, the whole impetus for her being there is so she can use that opportunity to sell beignets, to get a bunch of money, to get this place, or at least to be able to support this place. Her goal is her business. Like, that's her whole point, is her business. Her entire storyline is working towards this goal, this ambition that she has. And each step, each person she interacts with, she's trying to work towards that. And she doesn't do it through cruelty. She doesn't do it through mass exploitation. She's not a villain. A villain would do those things. A black-aligned hero is still going to be steadfast, individualistic, and goal-oriented. And she is a perfect example of someone black-aligned not being a villain, an antagonist. And next up, another black-aligned hero, and I am jazzed about this one. Alexander Hamilton, as depicted in the stage play Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda. That man is black-aligned to a fucking T! He is so consumed by his own legacy and his own ambition and his own next step up. Like, in the first frickin' song, he is working to get out of this place, but there's still another step. He sides on revolution and rebellion because the ruling British are so oppressive and so restrictive and propagandistic in order to keep people in line. Then after that, he's using the war to improve his station by his own admittance. And it's not entirely the reason, I know, but he's using that as a resource, and it has its value of improving his own place in society. He even marries to improve his station. He marries the daughter of a wealthy politician to improve his station. And sure, they genuinely fall in love. I get that. That's true. But at the start of it, motherfucker's never gonna be satisfied. It's the whole point. He's so obsessed with his own legacy. Legacy! What is a legacy? By the way, that last point, his whole what is a legacy and like letting go of his pride and everything is the end of his story. That is his final realization before he fucking dies. Before he gets goddamn murked by another black-aligned character, let me remind you. Excuse me. Alexander Hamilton is a clear black-aligned hero. Protagonist. Well, that about wraps it up for black. I hope you've garnered a certain understanding about the color. I hope any preconceptions you've had about black have been cleared up, and I don't know, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that black's alignment and place in the color pie has been made a bit more clear. I would also like to say every color is very deep and has many facets to them, even though they might prioritize certain actions over others, certain beliefs over others. Each color has value. Each color is important to a well-rounded person. And now I will segue that into... I'm sure I'll cover this in a future video, but every person has each color within them. The only difference is what color they tend to feel more comfortable acting towards. That's all that whatever color identity is defined by. And that changes over time, or it could not change over time. Like, I myself have drifted from Gruul to Simic to Izzet to Orzhov back to Simic back to Gruul-ish. Like, people change, their values change, their ideals change, the decisions they make and why they make them change. Each person has black facets to them and those sort of ideals that they focus on and choices that they make for black aligned reasons, the same way that they would have choices they make based on blue aligned, based on white aligned, green, red, all of that. There is nothing wrong with the black alignment and the black philosophy of the color pie. It's just another color. Well, that got unnecessarily deep. I'm gonna move on to the call to action because, you know, algorithm. Please, in the comments below, share your opinions on black. Tell me, what did you agree with? What did I miss out on? Are there any other black aligned characters that you would have loved for me to have talked about or you want to mention yourself? I will have a link to not only the TV tropes page, which for some reason is super deep on the magic color pie, which I didn't know about until a long time ago, less than a year. I'll have a link to that same article I've been linking towards on Medium, which actually goes really in depth on each of the individual colors. Next color is red. Hopefully it doesn't take another 6 months to get out. Jesus Christ, 6 or 7 months? I'm so sorry. I'm trying my best here. I got other stuff I'm working around, trying to survive, and at the same time, still trying to be creative a little bit. I'm doing my best. But yeah, next color is red. I'm super excited to get on that because red is deeply important to me. Not only mechanically in the game, but also just like that ideology is very important to me. But in any case, that's pretty much all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please share this with people you think might find it interesting. And just, you know, tagline, be kind, be creative, play games. See ya. God damn. I knew this video was gonna get heated. I knew this was gonna be a friggin' charged video. I knew it. Oh god, I just want to get to green. Okay, shake that off. I'm going insane, dude. Holy fuck. Okay.